Hmm. Yeah, those would be my mouse clicks, waiting for Gory, I think.
And while we wait, I think we need also our note-taking and JabberScribe roles if anyone wants to volunteer.
Wes, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, that's okay. Hmm.
David, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think so now. Need to put my headset on. It's way too early in the morning here. I don't see Gory yet.
No. I did get an email from him a few minutes ago.
Well, that's good. All right. Let me go have a look. All right, I've pasted the agenda into the minute-taking tool. All right, should we just go ahead and go ahead and get started?
Yeah, we may need to. I see in the chat Pete mentioned that Gory's on regular Jabber. I guess if you could ping him, that would be helpful. But we can start in the meantime.
Okay. I hope this works. Welcome to Transport Area Working Group TSVWG at IETF 109. This is the Note Well slide. Please read it. It applies to you. Okay, I need folks to watch the Jabber window and take notes. So what I'm hoping is simply with the collaborative note-taking tool, we can get all the notes captured as we go along. Pete, since you've got access to Jabber, do you want to try to play JabberScribe?
If that simply means relaying questions to the mic, I'm glad to do that. I'm probably a little too stupid to make useful notes of things.
Relaying questions to the mic is what's wanted in case we stop paying attention to the chat window. The detachable chat should be gatewayed into Jabber, and it should all work.
Very good. I can do that.
Please do. Thank you. Somebody want to volunteer to be note taker to make sure we get crucial stuff captured in the notes. We don't need blow by blow. We just need key points and key decisions made.
I can try to do that. My connection is a little flaky, so if I miss things, sorry about that.
And who's speaking?
Sorry, Andrew McGregor.
Thank you, Andrew. That'll be excellent. All right. Let me go make some.
I think I see Gory joined too. But not with a chair role, so we'll have to give him permission to talk.
All right. Okay. Figure out what I'm doing here. Apologies, folks. Everything is going to be slow this morning due to the time zone. All right. Okay. A little bit on Meetecho usage tips. Chat can be separated into a Jabber-like window, and you can open up the note taker tool, which is CodeMD, in a separate editor tab or window that will enable Meetecho to stay focused on the meeting. For discussion, please use the Meetecho mic queue. Click the hand plus microphone icon to join the mic queue. Please avoid the triangle plus microphone icon until we tell you to. Interrupting is not a best practice. General request: document quality relies on reviews. Please review documents here in this working group, at least one of the documents, another working group. In general, if you'd like documents you care about reviewed, please put the effort in to review other documents. There we go. That might look better. Now we've got a slide footer. Okay, review of what we've done. There's been one RFC published since the last IETF, datagram PLPMTUD RFC 8899. The diffserv and WebRTC QoS draft is still in the author's 48 done state at the RFC editor. Sometime soon, it is promised or threatened all of the WebRTC cluster drafts, including this one, infamous cluster 238, will be published. We have one ID at the IESG. Our area director is reviewing, or if you like, evaluating. This is transport header confidentiality. We have 3 internet drafts with the chairs and authors after a group last call. The 2 ECN drafts where Bob and I need to work over the fragmentation text. I see he posted new versions this morning. I will read them when I'm more awake and see how close we are to fragmentation text. We'll get the job done. SCTP NAT support. That's with the shepherd, who is Gory. And it's waiting Doc Shepard write-up. We have no internet drafts working last call. There are 6 other drafts in the working group. The main SCTP revision, the 3 Alpha S drafts, the non-Q building of PHP draft, and the UDP options draft. There will probably be requests to adopt more drafts in the meeting. I think at least one more in the UDP options area, if I remember correctly. All right, hang on. Let's see if we can get that line up. Okay. List of related drafts, some of which we will talk about in this meeting. There's a PathMQ Discover IPv6 draft over in 6man. The low latency DOCSIS draft, including DOCSIS queue protection, have been submitted to the independent submission editor. The UDP options for datagram path MTU discovery. So this is actually DPLP MTUD doing it via UDP options is this individual draft Fairhurst. We have an LFRS operations draft. Michael Tuxon has a draft on UDP and CAPS considerations for SCTP. And there's a couple of drafts listed here proposing new work on congestion control. Okay, agenda. We are in the middle of bashing the agenda. Monday is Dr. Collins the status, milestone review coming up next, drafts, and Wednesday agenda is more drafts. The L4S and NQB drafts are on Wednesday. Okay, milestone review. Hang on. Okay. SCTP NAT support was a September milestone. It's almost done. No date change. We submitted to our AD for processing towards becoming an RFC shortly. We had, for some reason, an October 2020 date on one of the L4S drafts. That's going to move to October 2021 with all the L4S drafts. There are 2 EC encapsulation drafts that have just been resubmitted. With a little bit of luck and a falling wind, we can get those published this month. So don't change those drafts. December 2020, submit SCTP as a proposed standard RFC. We're going to need to move that date into sometime early next year, probably March or April. And then these are the remaining milestones. The UDP options draft and the NQB draft currently scheduled for February. We'll see whether those happen or not and adjust those at the next meeting if they don't. And then a couple of October milestones for the LFRS drafts, and we'll move the other LFRS drafts out here. Let me just quick check. Yes, we have 9 drafts, 9 milestones, so it matches. The chairs are doing something to earn our exorbitant salaries. Okay, this is the.
Bob's in the queue. I think he probably wants to talk about the L4S milestones.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm staring at PowerPoint, which makes it a little harder to look at the queue. Okay, Bob, go ahead. I think what I do is I tell you to go ahead and you push your mic button is how this works.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. It's working.
Wow. By the way, I now have fiber to the home rather than a little bit of verdigris connected by copper atoms. Anyway, the milestone, I did send a note to Wes asking why that had been put out to October 2021 when we noticed it had happened. Didn't see any conversation about it. And we've been, pulling out all the stops to get them all done for this meeting. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
The crucial thing is we need a safety case for L4S to go to working group last call, and I believe that's in Greg's L4S operations draft.
Okay, you told me that wouldn't hold up the other drafts.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I said that. Other people may have. I don't think I did.
I'm sure it was you, but it might have been Wes. Anyway, what's going on?
A successful working group last call on L4S requires the working group to get to rough consensus that it's safe to run the experiment on the internet.
Right.
And I was under the impression the carrier for that that material was going to be the operations draft.
Okay, well it's just not what Wes told us, or you told us, or someone. And if they had, we'd have done things differently, like we'd have, pushed on that one a lot more. It sounds like communications problems. I'll dig out the emails, but okay.
Okay, I mean I don't believe that goal let's see, that goal of needing a safety case should not be a surprise. The mechanics of doing so.
No, it's the conditionality of it.
I believe that was stated in the conclusion from the interim meeting, and when we decided that we were going to move forward, focusing on the all-for-us drafts.
No, it was stated exactly the opposite way around, that it would not be conditional.
We'll have to go dig. We'll have to go dig. We'll have to go dig out the various things. My understanding is that the working group has to come up with a safety case. Now, if you believe that the main drafts contain the safety case, we can try that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would think that the key is not the status of the other draft, but rather the working group's feeling that what's going into it is going to work.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
Yeah.
That as long as there was, you know, the if you like, the concepts behind it, or the you know, the way forward, as long as there was consensus on that, the actual text didn't have to have been you know, finished and gone to working group last call.
Yes.
So given that, David, is there possibility of pulling that milestone back in, I think, is Bob's question.
Certainly a possibility. We need to come up with a tentative date to move all three of them to.
It's Gory here. I'd be okay to consider working group last calling these documents as soon as they are ready to be working group last called. When they progress to the IESGs, just when they progress to the IESG, when that safety case is clear, the milestone doesn't really change this, does it?
I think there has to be a safety case in order to have a successful working group last call.
It sounds like this is why we got mixed or got the wrong message, because different chairs seem to be saying different things.
Mm-hmm. I'm quite certain that the notes that were sent out after we got through all of the decisions made around that we're going to focus on L4S says that a successful working group last call requires there to be a safety case.
Should we take an action to reevaluate this at the after the Wednesday meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Works for me. I think probably the chairs need to be clear on this. We could talk to the AD, and between the group of us come up with some clear indication of what's needed.
I mean, put it this way: all the three main L4S documents, I've pulled out all the stops that I just reposted them all last night. They've all been spell checked, grammar checked. They've been stable for a while. We've been battering on the wording, so they're ready for working group last call. And it does no harm to go through a working group last call, even if they're not going to go to the IESG.
Well, at the very least, we know we have to settle the queue protection issue before we take a working group last call. And I think we need to understand understand where the safety case is to be found.
I know.
All right, I think chairs will consult offline with L1 draft authors to figure out what the new milestone ought to be. October 2021 might be too far out, but I don't think it's this month. I could be wrong and surprised. Okay. All right. Okay. And what's clearly going on here is I can't Let's see if I can get my screen set up a little bit differently so I've got some chance of seeing the mic cue. Sorry, slow this morning. All right. With luck, I can now see everything going on here. All right. Okay. So those are the milestones. This is today's agenda. We have a number of drafts that we're going to go through with one slide per draft, if we can figure out how to present them. I saw at least one of these things show up as a zip file. I can't quite figure out where the slide is. We're going to do SCTP, UDP options, both the main UDP options draft and the draft on the GDP options for datagram PLPMTUD, NQB draft, DCCP extensions. Then here's the Wednesday agenda, L4S. Okay, we have yes, we managed to move NQB into today. L4S is most of the entire Wednesday session. If we get really lucky and run short today, we might start in on some of the L4S topics today. Okay, so now, hang on, that's not going to work. Okay. All right, so staring at the agenda, I think next up is a one slide update on SCE, which I haven't looked at before I click on this. Let's see what happens. Here it is. So, Jonathan, you want to say do you want to say a few words about this slide?
Yes, I can do that. Okay, so I'm Jonathan Morton, and we've been putting SCE in the background for now while the working group is dealing with L4S as agreed in March. We have updated our main draft to bring it up to date with our technical progress over the past year. We have a more detailed design rationale and an outline of our use of diffserv to perform an isolated experiment on internet scale paths. And I'd also like to say that we are now funded for the next year, so we will carry on working in the background. And of more immediate concern, we have recently posted a fresh set of red team tests about L4S's performance, and we've kicked off some discussion of that on the list, and we will continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, something didn't work in the slide material for generic transport functions. I got a zip archive that I have no idea how to display. Let's try this thing and see what happens. This other one and see what happens. Okay. Does the author want to say a few words about this draft aside TSVWG transport review?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Fuchikasai. I propose, I reviewed the transport layer functionality to develop a new protocols, transport layer protocol for the new distributed computing paradigms, such as the PubSub communication, edge computing, and the in-network computing. So I reviewed the current transport layer architecture, and I want to divide the transport layer into the two sub-layers, data path layer and the data flow layer. The data path layer should handle some kind of the related to the functions related to the data path, such as the inbound trajectory monitoring or waypoint management that is related to the the passive computing research group, passive networking research group, and it should handle the bidirectional connection, quality monitoring for congestion control, and data flow multiplexing. It may support some path interpretation for the highly reliable communication. And beyond that, data flow layer handles the transmission, flow control, flow prioritization, end-to-end security, and the inverse multiplexing for multipath transport protocols. So please read the draft and discuss it on the mailing list.
If you're interested in draft, please follow up with the mailing list and with the author directly. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Unfortunately, where am I? Okay. We have new work on generic transport functions. Unfortunately, the materials for that don't seem to work. I get a zip archive. I have no idea how to display it. If we can figure out how to get a slide that we can display, we'll come back to that.
We've got someone in the queue, David.
All right. Go ahead, Kariti. Okay, to go ahead, you need to click on, when we tell you to go ahead, you need to click on the mic plus triangle button. It turns to mic plus square, and then we should be able to hear you. There we go. Thank you.
Now?
Yes, now.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I was talking to myself then.
Sorry.
Which is not surprising. It's 1:30 in the morning for some of us. So I have the draft. I have the slide on generic transport functions. I don't know how to
try to share it and talk to it for a couple of minutes. Go ahead. I'll take my screen off.
How do I share?
You push on publish screen. There's a button with a screen. It may have a triangle on it. Up near where you found the mic button.
Yeah, enter screen queue.
Yeah, try that and let's see if let's see what happens here. Okay. Now if I click on that, we might get your screen.
Okay. Let's see what you get.
All right. It thinks it's sending a screen. You may have to do something to actually share your window.
Share window. I'll just share the whole screen. Oh, I have to give it permissions to do all this.
This is why we're trying to do this all through the meeting materials if we could. But unfortunately, the zip. I looked at the zip archive. There was a boatload of XML in there. I have no idea what to do with it.
Okay. Can you see anything?
Not yet. Wait a minute, something might be happening. Oh no, you lost your screen share.
I lost my screen share.
Yes.
That's not a good thing.
You probably need to get back into the screen queue. Let's try that again.
So the object cannot be found.
All right.
Okay.
Get us a PDF by before the Wednesday meeting, and we'll put that up at the start of the Wednesday meeting. I think is what one needs to do. We unfortunately do need to move on.
All right, I will do that.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So what I think is next is SCTP BIS update. Michael, do you want to just speak to that? I don't think I see slides for that.
I sent slides this morning, yesterday night to Gori. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. They have not made it up to the website.
Okay. So
Gori, do you have them? Oh, why don't we try? Let's try that screen share thing again. Can you share your screen and project the slides from your system?
then I need to get the slides on that system I'm using.
Uh-oh.
So I would suggest we go without slides because
sure.
I need to get them up because so the document hasn't changed since I focused on the net document, which is finished now from the perspective of the authors. What needs to be done is, and that's what I'm currently working on, is change the XML v2 to v3, which might result in some formatting changes, but no content change. There are still some editorial comments I have to integrate from Gori, which are a no-brainer, and the removal of Appendix A, which is ECN. This was discussed at the last meeting, that we have normative language in an appendix, and that shouldn't be there. The point was to remove it and to have a separate document for ECN related to SCTP, and to update the acknowledgement section, which is also uncritical because we have to adopt it to the inclusion of the errata document. That will be finished this week, and then the document is ready. Gori asked last time to reach out to people for reviews, and I managed to get a Linux maintainer, so one of the maintainers of the Linux SCTP stacks as a reviewer, Marcelo Cachong from Oracle. Oracle also has an SCTP implementation in the kernel. The FreeBSD kernel implementation is covered by the authors. We have two reviewers from proprietary stacks, which is Barry Zuckerman from edX and Claudio Porfiri from Ericsson, and Timo Volker, who will read the document at a whole without knowing the past. I have one review, one request still open. We will see, but that should cover that should cover the OS included implementations and also some proprietary ones.
Okay.
Not all these peoples are active on the on the TSV list, so I told them that I will ping them once the document is ready for review.
Okay. Do you want to do those reviews before working group last call, or do you want those reviews done as part of working group last call?
That's what I wanted to ask the chairs. I don't care.
would suggest just go ahead and when the document is ready, get the reviews, post the reviews to the list. Don't
before the last
wait.
call.
Before I think before working with last call. Is Gory on audio? Yeah.
I don't think he is, but that approach makes sense to me too, because then we can last call it, saying those have been addressed.
Yes.
Yeah. So a couple of the people also wanted a bit of time for the review. So a 2-week or 3-week working group last call time might be a bit short for them. So that's why I said when I submit the next revision, then I will ping them, then they can have a look at that.
Okay. And then let us know how the reviews are going. Please post the reviews to the list, at least anything technical.
I will tell them that they should send the comments to the list.
Yes, please. And then we can take a look at that and decide whether we're going to last call. But it sounds like we are close to anticipated schedule, which means we're working with last call it either next month or in January.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, at this early hour of the morning here, I believe the plan for UDP options is we have one presentation from Tom Jones that covers both drafts. Okay, Tom, you want to go ahead and speak to these? I'll click the slides forward as we need to. I don't actually see Tom in the attendee list. Is he here?
We may need to move this to the end of the meeting if Gory can rejoin.
Yeah, if we can get audio from Gory, that would be better. I mean, I will. You and I don't think we'll do a real good job presenting these slides.
No.
I think Tom isn't registered for the IETF.
I'm sorry, say it again. All right, let's try this again at the end of the meeting, I suppose.
The Meetecho problem with people not able to rejoin at the moment. They're working on it.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, Gory mentioned in the Jabber room that he's unable to join.
Unfortunately, the Jabber is also not reflected in the Meetecho chat anymore at this point.
Yeah, that's also an unfortunate problem. Thank you for paying attention to that, Pete.
Gory says, I wanted to present DPLP MTU D for UDPO.
Yeah, okay.
If I can interject a moment, I think the Meetecho chat has stopped working completely.
It has. I'm watching the Jabber through the regular Jabber room, but
yeah,
the
it has.
interconnection
I just typed
the
something
interconnection
into
between Jabber and Meetecho is having a problem.
All right. I just typed chat test into the Meetecho chat. Did anybody see that, or did that not come through?
I did not see that. Did you see any?
It did not go. It did not go through.
Okay, then the Meetecho chat has completely stopped on us.
But Gory says to the chairs, my computer rebooted and I lost auth to join. There are technical issues. I can hear and use regular Jabber only.
So are there any presenters that are here and able to present for the remainder of the agenda?
Greg White for NQB also said he's unable to join the Meetecho. As well as Marcus.
All right. Ouch.
So that's the rest of the agenda.
That is the rest. That is the rest of the agenda.
Kiriti is in the queue.
Okay. Kariti, were you able to find a slide?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I just sent it to you. I sent you a PDF. Hopefully
If you just sent it to me, let me see if I've got it.
I sent it to all three of you, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think I have it. It will be up in a minute.
I think in general, PDF is the most reliable format.
Okay, hang on. Let's just see if that worked.
I can see it.
Okay, go ahead. You can go speak briefly to that while we hope a Meetecho miracle happens.
Okay, so basically we're looking at the idea of having to do fragmentation on different payloads, not necessarily IP. So it could be an Ethernet, it could be a pseudowire, it could be MPLS. And so instead of trying to invent a new way of doing it, we decided to reuse the IPv6 methodology. Of course, the funky thing about IPv6 is it relies on the previous header to say that the next header is fragmentation. The other thing is that it knows that there's an IPv6 header address field, so it doesn't need an identification. It only needs to identify the fragment number. So we need more of an identification. So we're using the same functionality, adding a little bit to it, and trying to say, let's reuse that for fragmenting other things besides IP. That's and in general, we think we can use it for other things as well as perhaps ESP payloads, but we're starting with fragmentation. That's the quick summary. And what you have here is essentially the deltas between a fragment header in IPv6 and the fragment header we're trying to use.
Okay, so please send a note to the list with the draft name, and when you're more awake, please send the chairs a copy of this slide that doesn't have the Juniper Business Use Only footer on it, so we can post that.
Okay.
I get bit by that all the time.
Yeah. Well, I was just trying to get it out quickly, but I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Mission accomplished, and it sounds like, unless something happens quickly to Meetecho, that we have a bust this morning. Unless we want to pull the L4S stuff in because Bob's on.
David, Gory made a comment in the Jabber room. He says the fragmentation work may be relevant to several working groups. It could touch transport such as GRE, and it might be work in another group. Anyway, please read and make comments.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, I'll put the note here. Okay. All right. All right, so given the Meetecho problems, Bob, I'm guessing the LFRS material is not going to be ready till Wednesday. You're busy working on drafts.
Correct.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. I suspect, given the Meetecho problems, I see an ED on. My initial judgment is going to be that maybe we simply declare that we've been overcome by events and we need to schedule an interim in the very near future to go pick up what we're going to do here.
Well, so the other alternative that there is to extend our second session into the break time a little bit so that we can get through more of the agenda. If the consensus is that we want to do that, I can request it, and I'm sure we can get the time from Meetecho since they've made this not viable.
Yeah, we're missing 3 different topics.
So do we want to extend the second session into the time leading up to the plenary?
That would. Let me go look at the agenda on my browser screen. Can
I also suggest
that gets us what, half an hour?
Yeah.
Can I also suggest, rather than abandoning the meeting, just everyone holding into it, carrying on with, I don't know, whatever they're doing, and in case the Meetecho comes back, because it would be silly to abandon the meeting before the end if Meetecho gets fixed.
I do know they're working on the problem right now. Of course, some of us are in a position where we would go to bed if this rather than work on other things. But I let me see if I can get some idea what the timing is.
Thank you. All right. So while I'm waiting for a reply on that, do we want to have a longer meeting Wednesday, or do you just want to say to heck with it and have an interim? I think we're going to need to do both. Please give us extra half hour on Wednesday, and let's assume we're going to have an interim. We could use the time we do have here to see if Bob and the 2 chairs who are on audio have the same view of what's supposed to happen to the LFRS drafts. Not having had coffee this morning, I think where we are is that all 3 of the drafts go to last call. It's not necessary to last call the LFRS operations draft with the 3 main drafts, but a successful working group last call requires working group rough consensus that the LFRS experiment is safe to run. And to the extent that the LFRS operations draft is the carrier of that safety case, the working group has to be confident that it does in fact make an acceptable safety case. Bob, how close is that to your view of the world?
That is what I thought had already been said. Yes.
Okay, then we don't have a communication problem to resolve, aside from the fact that this hour of meeting requires copy for the North American participants, which I can't go out in the hall and get.
And presumably, as Spencer said, we can meet the milestone early, but I don't know whether the chairs want to schedule an earlier time in case we do, or for their own schedule. But I would really hope this is not going to take another year. I wouldn't only hope it. It's just impossible if it's going to take another year. It was 4 years when we did the working group last call, when we were about to in March, but 2 weeks before that SCE came up, and it's just, people are no longer on projects on this. It's very difficult to pull it all together.
Off the top of my head, let's give ourselves one more meeting cycle, and the milestone, which is the milestone for when we're done working with last call, would then be I think April.
Right. That sounds more reasonable.
So I would like to understand the what the plan here. So then the idea is that we will have a working group last call with the idea is that the working group will judge it to be safe on the internet because of a adopted but not ready draft about these operational concerns. It's informational. And
yes,
and
in particular, I think we will need to adopt the operations. I think the working group will. I think works blah blah blah. I think your suggestion that working group adoption of the operations draft is a prerequisite to last call on the main LFRS drafts is the right way to do this.
Well, so this is a little irregular, right? Because then. So in principle, we send this to IETF last call with no document except maybe an informational reference to an adopted draft that so it goes to IETF last call with really no accepted approved documentation on these operational concerns, and so we have to get through IETF last call to ISG review without a approved method for or a set of requirements for proper endpoint behavior, which seems
I'm not the operations draft. How much operations draft is endpoint behavior, and how much of it is operator network defense?
Yes. Okay. Pardon me. Yes, you're right.
Because the endpoint behavior, I think TCP prog is headed for ICCRG.
Okay. Fair enough.
And so maybe what we're trying to do is, if a bunch of stuff has been moved to get the LFRS drafts into what is believed to be near final, I guess focus in the next few months needs to shift to the operations draft and getting it adopted, and let's see how fast we can move that along.
Sorry for interrupting you for a second. So we just heard that Meetecho has to restart its server, and that will kick everybody out, and then it might take a few minutes until everybody can rejoin. So if the session suddenly ends, that's what's happening, just to let you know.
Okay.
So
sounds like you would really like to see all 4 drafts in one package.
Well, I'm kind of struggling to see. I'm struggling to think of the proper. I mean, I'm sorry, this is a very bureaucratic concern, but I'm struggling a little bit with this having a standard where there are kind of necessary safety requirements, which are documented in an informational draft, which obviously is a DONREF. And I'm wondering if something needs to be something like that. I hate to say this, but the operational draft has to be standards track, or some of it needs to move into the standards track documents, because we can't ship.
They're experimental.
Oh, pardon me, experimental. Okay, very good. Pizza in the queue. I'm gonna give up the floor.
Yeah, just because Gory said in the chat room, isn't the experimental status partly a need to get operational guidance and best practice for operators?
Yeah, there's a hair to be split here in that
I think I actually reconnected. Am I talking to anybody?
Yeah, I think everybody is back in. Except we lost our illustrious chairs there for a bit.
Yeah, we'll be back. You see the rejoining gradually happening.
There's David. Hasn't turned on his mic yet, but oh, and Gory too. Good.
I see Gory as a chair now. Something must be working.
David, so you cut out for me at least when you start saying there's a hair to be split.
Yeah, okay.
Here. That's
So
where you cut out.
I think the hair to be split is between what is necessary to run the experiment safely, i.e., what do operators do to prevent really bad things from happening, which we need now to run the experiment, and then what are the operational guidelines to actually run L4S as a service, as a deployed service on a network, which is what we want to learn from the results of that experiment. Martin, are you on? Yes, I think.
So, Gory, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Whoa! Hello, everybody. Yeah, I think the seeming disconnect between chairs is in that hair-splitting area. We all talked about this as chairs, and we agreed that there has to be ways to stop things going wrong. And the question is really, what level is that guidance at? Is it actual tooling? Is it just the mechanism to turn it off? Somewhere along that spectrum of different possibilities, we have a informational document currently, and we have what the guidance in the EXP documents themselves, and we have the experiment that's going on. And we probably just have to get some better clarity about what's needed to complete the working group last call, which parts of these are needed.
Yeah, and I think it's mostly the making sure really bad things don't happen. By analogy, I think of this as being guardrails along the side of the road, as opposed to advice to the driver to how to keep the car centered in the lane.
So, by the way, Gory, thank you for pointing out this experimental and having some of the same time zone issues everyone else is. But I guess a better way of putting it is that I have a little difficulty with the working group requiring a certain document to safely judge the L4S package and then sending it to IETF and the ISG without that complete package and saying, here, this is good. It seems a little problematic. I mean, especially if there were some issue with, for some reason, with the ops document that held it up further. But I think now that we have the ability to have a normal meeting again, why don't we go back to the agenda? And right. I think that the principals need to have a conversation about this and figure out where we're at.
And it sounds like independent of the process details, the focus for the next meeting cycle needs to be on that operations draft as providing the guardrails to run the experiment, and at the very least, the next goal to shoot for is working with adoption of it. All right. So where were we when we started to be unable to do things?
David, I suggest you show the agenda, and we remind people what we're trying to do.
I gotta go. Hang on. Okay, so I think we got through the SCTP drafts, and alrighty. Hang on. No, it's not that one.
David, have you got the agenda slide so we can just check that you can present something?
About to do that. My turn to restart something. It lost track of Acrobat for some reason.
Cool. So while you're getting ready,
pop the chair slides back up again.
I suspect the plan is that we go through the agenda in the same order we have written on the agenda slide, so that people can try and regain synchronization, which means we're going to start the presentations for the drafts.
I think UDP options is next.
Okay.
And okay. All right, I'm gonna okay. Gori, why don't you, can you share materials? I'm going to have to drop out and restart as well. Something is going wrong in the browser. I'm going.
And David, your audio is not on, but your screen is up and showing.
There we go. Now you ought to be able to hear me. Thank you, Pete.
Okay.
Okay. So I've got the agenda up. Let me see if I can get the slides up.
So David and group, I think we covered 4.1. Is that correct?
Yes, you're up on the UDP options.
Fine.
Which with luck I've just shared.
Yes, I see that. Okay, before I talk to this, I'd like a quick update for Joe Touch's work on the UDP options draft itself. So Joe is still working on this draft. He has a new revision which he intends to upload after this meeting, which will address the issues that were raised last IETF. So the work is progressing, but we're still in need of a new revision in the archive to see the results of Joe's work. Does anybody have questions on UDP options as a whole? Okay. Then I am going to work with Joe and make sure that Joe uploads this new revision. And there's going to be the changes that were requested, so we'll expect those, and then we need to have discussion on the list about these. This particular slide deck is about the datagram PLP MTUD support for UDP options. I'm going to give a little bit of history here, because at the end of this slide deck, we're going to ask for a working group adoption. So this particular draft is draft revision 3. The original work was done within the DPLP MTUD draft itself, which is now published. So what does the options draft now contain? It contains the mechanism for making UDP options support DPLP MTUD, and as such, it provides confirmation of connectivity across a path, something essential for DPLP MTUD. It describes the sending of UDP options for the probe packets that are used, how to validate the path, PTB handling, mainly the issue that PTB messages don't necessarily make user space. And the last but one line is the most important. It's intended as a template for other drafts that need to describe how to make DPLP MTUD work. I kind of expect that other protocols will follow this specification we produced in TSVWG, and will need to write short drafts to say how their particular protocol works with the discovery of the PMTU. And one thing that's important as I say this is that the actual draft is only 7 pages plus appendices. So it's a very short draft that just basically describes the extra machinery needed. So it's short. That means people probably can read it if they want to. So I'm inviting you to read it. Next slide, please. What's new since version 2 of this draft. Since revision 2, we've updated to refer to the published RFC. We've rewrote the text on sending method, on the probe construction and path validation. These are mainly just text edits to bring this in line, and we've added security considerations so the draft is complete. Next slide, please. There is work to implement this. It would be rather foolish to define a method and not try it. So we have seen 2 implementations. One is a SCAPI-based tooling and test suite, basically to see if the mechanism works. The other one is a FreeBSD kernel implementation, which is available at the URL below. It's an individual contribution, so it's a set of deltas to the actual kernel implementation. Please contact us if you're interested. This is Tom's work. Tom plans to do more in this space. Tom would love to not be on his own. So if you have any interest in this, please contact Tom or have a look at the implementation. If you're doing your own implementation, please tell us. Well, we've written as much as we can. So yeah, the next slide, that's good. We think the draft is more or less finished. It's 7 pages of text plus appendices. We've got some code which says this code can be made to work within an operating system. To us, this seems mature. Maybe to you, it's time to read it. So our question to the group is, will TSVWG adopt the current topic? I'd imagine this was for publication as a PS. If UDP options is also a PS, I would imagine this might be a PS. What do people think about this topic? What do people think about adoption? I'll take questions.
I have a question. Can you hear me? This is Vidi, Apple.
Sure.
So my question is, we do DPL, PMTUD, and Quick, and we use Quick header itself to do that, right? And Quick is built on top of UDP. So is this like mainly for, you know, protocols that use plain UDP? Because I mean, for UDP, is it even necessary to know the path MTU, because IP can do fragmentation? So for non-reliable protocol that runs over UDP, I'm a bit, I haven't read the draft, I apologize for that, but I'm just, you know, like thinking about it right now.
Okay, I'm trying to hear, just a minute. The UDP options method is primarily aimed at transports which want to layer on top of UDP. So Quick is one of those transports. However, Quick has a DPLP MTUD module within it, and it's clear that you don't want to do this twice. So you shouldn't be using this UDP options framework with Quick. There are various reasons why you might not want to, but particularly for DPLP MTUD, this would be duplication of discovery probing. It might well work. That'd be an interesting research project to see if the two actually worked, but there's no point in this, and the extra traffic certainly isn't wanted. So categorically, I'd say this is not for you using with Quick. There are other places where you might want to use UDP as a transport, and you might want to choose the right size. Maybe it's a UDP tunnel encapsulation. Maybe it's just another protocol that's sending messages of a particular size, and you want to know what size is the largest size you can use. IP fragmentation is a different game, and there are problems with IP fragmentation. See 8900 for why IP fragmentation is not necessarily the right solution. So This is really adding that DPL PMTUD function that's already in Quick to the UDP options framework to allow other applications built on top of UDP options to also have the same features. Did that help?
Yeah.
Explain?
You need to turn your
Yeah,
mic
thank
back
you.
on. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, there's an echo on your line. Keep going.
I'm sorry. But I was just, yeah, thank you for the explanation. That does make sense to use UDP for those kind of scenarios. I had a follow-up question, but so this UDP option, can it be used for other things? I didn't see what specific options are there, but can it be used, like, is it generic option or is it specifically for DPL PMTUD?
It's meant to be offering equivalent options to TCP options. So it's meant to be a generic set of functions which you can build upon when you build a UDP-based transport. Most transports are not as sophisticated as Quick, so they don't have as much machinery, and this is a way to provide some common machinery to those other transports. So you can negotiate other things. Yeah, UDP options itself allows much more than DPL PMTUD.
Yeah. There is a draft on UDP options in general. Let me go find the name of that. If you look on TSVWG's main page, there's a draft on UDP options in general. It may have expired at this point, which is why it's hard to find.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. My apologies for stumbling around in. Okay. Let's try the show of hands tool in Meetecho. Let me see if I can make this work. Okay, we're trying to show a hands tool. Raise your hand if you've read if you've read this draft. Okay, I think about 4 people have read the draft. I'm going to say an adoption call seems appropriate as a next step, but I think we should run that on the list.
Thanks, David. I would take that as sensible input because people need to have read those 7 pages before they do that adoption call. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now where are we? Okay, I believe Greg. Greg, if you're on, please turn your mic and say something, and we can go to the NQB draft.
Hear me?
I think so. I heard hear me.
This is Greg.
Okay, cool. Let me go see if I can go get that material up. All right, you should have a slide in the screen if I've done this right.
All right, thank you. can move on to the next slide. This is discussing draft on the NQB per hop behavior, non-queue building per hop behavior. Just a quick update on the status. So this was an adopted draft as of shortly after IETF 105, so it's been adopted now for over a year. Couple of drafts I talked about in previous IETFs, draft 0 and draft 1. Since the last IETF, there have been 2 updates, draft 02 and draft 03. With the additions and changes listed here. Most of these items were things that were identified as necessary to align the draft with the requirements for PHP definitions that's provided in RFC 2475. So I think those are all complete now. And we can move on. And just a reminder, the milestone here is to submit this as proposed standard RFC by February of next year. So now we can move on. Remaining work items for this draft. So these I summarized also in an email to the mailing list yesterday, my time. I don't know where it landed in all of your inboxes, but there was some discussion on list about interconnection and the code point that the draft recommends currently is 42, and sort of some discussion about how that works across interconnections with the goal of this traffic marking being carried end-to-end across the internet, but there might be some issues with interconnection and the value 42. And so Rudiger, Geib, and Dave and I had some off-list discussion and came up with these 7 items. Most of them, I think that between the 3 of us, we had agreed seemed like good next steps. I think there are a couple of items that maybe need some further discussion. So let me run through these quickly, and all of these have a little bit more detail in the email I sent to the mailing list, but just go through them one by one here. So the first one is pretty simple. There's some terminology in the draft currently that talks about standardized DSCPs, and it was pointed out that that really is not the way that RFC 2474 lays things out, and nor is it the way things have been done with DSCPs so far in the IETF, in that what are standardized are the PHBs, and the DSCPs are recommended by IETF. So, well, pretty simple terminology update there, I think. Second one is eliminate the implication that diffserv is not intended to be used end-to-end. There's some of the text in the draft that indicates that a lot of the diffserv code points that are recommended in other drafts are not carried end-to-end for various reasons, and that the goal of NQB was that it eliminates some of the hurdles or roadblocks that have prevented that, and so it potentially could be carried end-to-end, but in that language it maybe overstates things a bit, and there's some clarification needed there. The next one, number 3, clarify aggregation of NQB traffic with default and discuss backbone networks. And this, I think, has been discussed quite a bit on the, or at least some on the mailing list, and is not covered in as much detail as is needed in the draft. The idea is that the NQB PHB can be supported in networks, and it provides a parallel queue that's at the same priority level as default. but just segregates NQB traffic from queue building traffic or default traffic. But in networks that don't support the PHP, that the NQB traffic should be aggregated with default traffic, and that's not really very clearly stated in the draft. So the idea is to add that as a should, and also in that case where the aggregation is happening, have the should that additionally that the NQB marking is preserved as well. And then describe in a bit more detail where full NQB support is needed versus where aggregation with default traffic is likely fine. Here we're talking about we have a set of use cases that the draft outlines where support for NQB PHP would be pretty useful. And the belief is that in backbone networks, the aggregation with default is likely fine there. So that's one chunk of text that needs to be added to the draft. Item 4, discuss interworking with practices in place in some interconnects and backbones regarding DSCP aggregation. And so this is the one that kind of kicked off Rudiger's comments, that in some interconnects and some networks, particularly those that are running MPLS, there is a limit to the number of service classes that can be carried, and so a lot of aggregation happens, and a lot of aggregation of district code points happens into these service classes that get mapped into MPLS aggregations. Although I don't think this is documented in an RFC, those aggregations typically, it sounds like, use essentially IP precedence bits in order to group DSCPs into those aggregations. And so if this traffic is intended to be aggregated with default, the use of a 000 XXX code point when sending traffic into those networks or across those interconnects would make it much easier for those networks to properly aggregate this traffic with default, and also make it easier for them to preserve the NQB marking. So some discussion of that is needed in the draft. Item 5, fix mention of aggregating network control with NQB, either remove it or provide sufficient context and warnings. So in the recent update, there was discussion about aggregating other code points with NQB in kind of in general context. There was a set of examples around motivated by a case where the network supports only 2 PHPs, default and NQB, and says, well, there are some of these other traffic class or service classes that could be aggregated, including EF and VA, CS5, and some others that have the property that they're not elastic and they're latency sensitive or loss sensitive. Network control falls into that category, but it was pointed out that that could be a problem if network control is aggregated with any traffic. The stability of the network could be difficult to maintain in cases where that traffic is delayed. And I don't have a strong feeling on this one. It was intended as an example, but nonetheless, some treatment of that is needed in the draft. So maybe some discussion on that on the list would help guide the direction there. Then item 6, clean up the Wi-Fi section to recommend PHP compliance more strongly. This section started out with a discussion with initial drafts started out with a discussion about existing Wi-Fi gear and the default mapping that that gear uses to map all of the diff-serve code points into Wi-Fi access categories, and the selection of a recommended code point for NQB that allows that traffic, NQB traffic, to be aggregated into a or carried on in a access category that is separate from default, so that so that it can not be queued alongside with queue building traffic. And it also, draft also mentions RFC 8325, which defines a different mapping of code points into access categories. But all of that was written kind of under the belief that interoperation with these two mappings was the only thing that needed to be discussed. I recently added a statement that indicates, well, actually, a Wi-Fi device certainly could implement support for the PHB directly and completely support the requirements. And I think that that section on Wi-Fi really could be cleaned up to more emphasize that compliance aspect, and then talk about these interoperation situations as maybe a secondary aspect. So I'm working there. And then the last point, this was brought up by Rudiger. Since in some networks, NQB and default should be aggregated, since in all networks, the PHB defines NQB to be given the same priority as default, should NQB be written as a PHB group along with default? That one I think we didn't reach agreement on off list. So if anyone has thoughts on that, that would be appreciated.
Okay, a few comments on this, Greg. Working bottom up, turning NQB into a PHB group with default should be a last resort. Not a good thing to do unless we have no other choice. I think right now my initial take is not necessary. I'll take a look. I will take a look at the email and comment on the list. The Wi-Fi section, as we discussed, I think off list, we're going to discuss on list. This interacts strongly with the selection of the default DSCP. Use of 42 is motivated by Wi-Fi, and we're going to need an on-list discussion of why that's being done. There's some comments in the chat room about the Wi-Fi access class that it maps to and consequences of that. And then numbers 3 and 4, it's going to take some careful crafting of text, because in essence, where we're trying to go is that in access networks such as Wi-Fi, there's a DSCP that appears to make a lot of sense. But once you get away from the access networks, it looks like a different DSCP makes a lot of sense. Look like I haven't said anything too embarrassing.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I think what's a bit unclear to me on the core networking and backbone networks aspect is that fairly universal, that the use of a 000XXX code point would be preferred, or is that in some networks and not others? And so
yeah, we can have a lot more. Let's see, operator survey is tough. We can try to do what we can. I mean, the general problem that MPLS backbone operators are up against is that there's very limited room in the MPLS label for what amount to DSCP values, and that plus the widespread practice of bleaching DSCPs to 0 at network interconnects interacts with 3 and 4 and may make some of the desire to reserve the NQB marking some wishful thinking. Okay, on to the next slide, I think. we have a lot more of this to discuss on the list.
Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah, so this was to get into that a little bit. Maybe we can at least provide what the rationale was for recommending 42, and but as you said, some of this discussion probably needs to take place on the list. One of the big rationales for recommending DHCP 42 is that for the end host, which is marking its traffic as NQB, it having the best a priori knowledge as to what its sending behavior is, and so having the best knowledge as to whether it's appropriate to mark that traffic NQB or not. In many cases, that end host is launching traffic into a network where there is no opportunity for a network element to remap that DHCP into another value prior to an important link where NQB treatment or pseudo NQB treatment is possible, and that's a Wi-Fi link. We noted that there are applications today that are compatible with NQB that already select a code point that in the default mapping of diff-serve code points to Wi-Fi access categories select a code point that maps to the video access category, or in some cases the voice access category. And even beyond that, the applications that do that today, future applications that can that would like to make use of NQB across the network would also presumably want to have their traffic queued separately from best effort traffic on Wi-Fi links, and so would similarly want to choose a diff-serve code point that in these default Wi-Fi networks maps to a separate access category from best effort. So the video access category is the one that would be useful for that. The belief here is that if we were to choose a different recommended code point, one that does not map into the video access category in this default mapping, that would go unused, that applications would instead fall back to a non-recommended code point for this. And whether that's CS5 or EF or CS7 in some cases, that would continue to be used as opposed to the recommended code point. A secondary rationale for this value 42 is that it's in the family with EF and VA and CS5, and so access network technologies that might want to aggregate those 4 code points together can do that with a mask on the diff-serve code point, looking for the pattern 101, don't care, 0. So that's the rationale that we have for 42. And then, as discussed a few minutes ago, there is some rationale for interconnections and backbone routers, where this value 000XXX would be a more easily used value.
Okay. Let's take a comment from Sebastian, and then I think most of the rest of the discussion, this is going to need to go to the list. Sebastian, go ahead. You'll need to click on your mic icon.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes, it's working.
Anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
And this is all garbled. I'll try nevertheless. So I like the draft a lot, but I have concerns about the default Wi-Fi mapping, because any network out there is going to up prioritize NQB packets without having all of the measures in place that the draft states that make NQB safe to deploy. What I recommend is using a DSCP that maps out of the 000 category and then instruct participating NQB aware access points to reprogram the quality of service map so that the access points can still use the 000XXX DSCP and still get mapped into the ACVI. This is possible, and this is a clean opt-in solution where none of the unsuspecting parties will accidentally swamp airtime from their neighbors. That's my point.
Okay. I think that the main issue with taking that path is the one that's listed on the slide here, that applications that today already map their traffic into the video access category, or as indicated in some cases, the voice access category, would continue to want to do so even on networks that don't support the NQB and don't opt in with the QoS map as you're suggesting. And so I think the end result there will be that no applications use the NQB code point because it doesn't provide the benefit that those applications are wanting to achieve on the Wi-Fi link.
Okay, I think we need to take further discussion of this and what to do about the list, as it's going to be subtle, as indicated by the amount of text on this slide. All right, so I think it says address above topics on list, please, and revised draft in the near future. Any further comments on this before we switch topics? Okay, thank you, Greg. Marcus, are you on? Marcus, go ahead and turn on your audio and we'll flip slides for you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, very good. So, hi everyone, or from a German perspective, good morning everyone. So it's 11:40 German time, fairly reasonable time to present you something around multipath DCCP. As you probably all know, we have 3 drafts published in the TSVWG. However, this time it's less on an update regarding the draft itself. It's more on our practical experience with our multipath DCCP UE implementation. Next slide, please. Yes, so first start with the figure on the right side on what the prototype implementation is about. So maybe starting on the top of the figure above the dashed line. So we implemented multipath DCCP between an Android phone, here it is called UE user equipment, and on the right side an aggregation point. So we leverage here multipath DCCP for providing multipath capabilities for at least UDP traffic complementing the existing multipath TCP. But it's not restricted to UDP traffic. It can even transport IP traffic or even layer 2. So the aggregation point then is the interface to the internet. So we provide then multipath over cellular access and wireless and or fixed access. If you look below the dashed line into the engine room, so what's implemented in the specific devices I mentioned, the user equipment and the aggregation point, you can see that we encapsulate any traffic coming from applications through a virtual network interface into DCCP flows or DCCP tunnels. we apply a scheduling scheme. It's a modular one. On the receiver side, we have a modular reordering scheme to bring packets in order again and then forward it to the internet. We also employ a path manager. All the stuff I will explain later on in my presentation. Let's go through the points on the left side. So, as I said, we use here the multipath DCCP extension, which is available as draft, and that one we have implemented in the Linux kernel. The architecture comprises a modular scheduler and reordering scheme, as I already mentioned, and that I will explain later on. Per part, we employ a DCCP tunnel. As you all know, the DCCP as such provides us the path characteristics by using congestion control. On the other hand, DCCP is unreliable, so that is the difference to TCP here. And this encapsulation of traffic into multipath DCCP, that is part of a draft we call multipath framework. So please look into that if you need more information. But it's fairly easy. So we just provide encapsulation into the multipath DCCP protocol. And last but not least, referring to our last draft we have available, that the DCCP UDP header conversion, that is an overhead-free conversion, just for the sake of middle boxes, which does not allow DCCP forwarding or path through. For that, we convert any DCCP traffic into UDP when we transport this traffic. So middle boxes which allow UDP traffic will also allow our traffic in that case, and then we reconvert on receiver side. Next slide, please. Okay, coming a little bit to the deployment settings. So as I already mentioned, it's part of the Linux kernel code. We implemented the multipath DCCP and also the encapsulation framework as loadable kernel modules. We deployed this setup over commercial network, so it's not part of a lab setup or a local setup. It's really commercial. And the aggregation point is located in a cloud internet server for that scenario. The UE specifications are Google Pixel 4 and using Android version 10. So the multipath DCCP is running in the Linux kernel where the Android based on. And we have also some implementation then in the Android version 10 network manager to bring out the multipath DCCP and all that stuff. On server side, we are using a Dell PowerEdge server. It's a quite powerful one. We operate at a German cloud provider. And as operation system, we use Debian Stretch. Both UE and server are based on Linux kernel version 4.14. Next slide, please. Yeah, so yeah, I jump into probably new topic for some of you. So starting with the title, prepared for 3GPP 80SSS, UDP or IP support. So 3GPP 80SSS, that is something which is defined as part of the 5G specification within 3GPP, and 80SSS is exactly what we have seen in the figures before, where multi-path or multi-connectivity is provided to mobile handsets by the 5G core, where the aggregation point is part of the 5G core. That's why I want to point in this slide that multipath DCCP, or the prototype we have developed, is exactly fitting into the 80SSS scope. So explaining you what is 80SSS, that is access traffic, and then we have the first S, that is steering, that allows for path selection whenever we communicate with the internet. So it's a or decision, either to use cellular or Wi-Fi. Then we have the switching, so we have to decide for one access or for one path, but there is the opportunity to seamlessly switch to the other access. And we have the splitting support that is the well-known path aggregation, also provided, for example, by multipath TCP, where we can leverage the capacities of both accesses or paths. So all these 3S are enabled in our setup, in our multipath TCP setup, by the combination of scheduling, reordering, and path management, as you have seen in the figures before. So the path manager, that's the one which detects local network interfaces and initiates connection on UE side. Again, that is similar to multipath TCP, and that one enables at least the steering. But it also reacts to changes in the network. So when the interface status change, IP addresses, whatever, then path manager is responsible for trigger the switching. The scheduling, that the entity which select the subflow through which data is to be sent, that execute the steering and switching functionality. But it also allows for executing splitting while it distributes traffic among the subflows. Last but not least, we have the reordering, and that we consider as a very important if we talk about multipath for unreliable traffic, as it is with UDP or with IP traffic, if we encapsulate this. Then we have to bring the packets again into the order they originated. We consider this very, very important because we cannot rely on the service or transport capabilities to deal with an unordered stream, which is pretty likely if we apply multipath and we have accesses with different latencies and so on. So reordering compensates overall packet scrambling introduced by different path latencies, and that's again supports the splitting use case. To enable all these 3Ss in the IETF that requires as well the transmission of signaling information. So we achieve this by implementing multipath options defined in our multipath TCP draft, like MP-sec for sequencing, MP-RTT for transmitting RTT information, but also new ones we have already implemented in our prototype, but not updated already in the multipath TCP draft. That is something what we will do after this IETF. That is, for example, MP path info and MP remove path. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the scheduling schemes we have implemented are in line with 3GPP IETF. So in the ATSSS specification, in the finalized release 16, where ATSSS was defined first, but also in the study files now for the next release 17, different steering or scheduling options are defined or discussed. And we provide most of this scheduling options as well in our prototype. That is cheapest pipe first. That's a priority-based mechanism which allows the operator or the UE to assign a cost value to each network path. That means we send data on the cheapest flow whenever possible. And if the congestion window then of the cheapest path is full or exceeded, it's sent on the next available path. So that is the splitting use case. We also implemented something in our scheduler which allows to give equal costs to accesses. In that case, we prefer the path with the lowest RTT. We support handover use case. So that is more or less similar to the cheapest pipe first principle. However, aggregation disabled in that case. So we send data on the prioritized path as long as the DCCP tunnel is available for this particular access or path. And if the DCCP tunnel is broken, it sends on the next available path. So that is switching and it's seamless. We also support an academic or scheduler, that is the round robin one, which distribute the traffic equally. I think I have not to explain this further. We also support fixed ratio and redundant. I hope they are self-explainable. Next slide, please. Reordering options, there we support 3 in the moment. That is active fixed. Fixed refers here to a static timeout until we assume a packet to be lost, and then process the next packet on receiver side. We have active adaptive, which tries to figure out, or which make the static timeout from the previous active fixed example, make this adaptive based on the RTT or latency difference information we have available. And also we have delay equalization function that is strictly spoken not a reordering option. It just tries to delay packets on the faster path by the amount of latency difference. Next slide, please. And that is now one of our results we were able to generate last week. So that was with the switch, that is the switching scenario, where we set up a real Skype video call. And we activated the handover scheduler, which allows for the seamless handover from one access to the other. Priority was set on the Wi-Fi part, and at 37 seconds, you see it on the right side in the figure, the Wi-Fi access was broken, and there was a seamless handover from the Wi-Fi to the cellular, to the LTE access in this case. And the Skype call remained active. And that is exactly what we expected to see. So during and after the switching, the video call remains active. That, I think, is a great outcome here. Next slide, please. As I said, our prototype also allows the splitting use case, where we aggregate the capacities of accesses. So there we have early results available. The splitting functionality, as I said, is supported in the prototype. We have this various schedulers that deal with the splitting use case, and on the right side you see we can combine capacities from the Wi-Fi and the LTE. However, we have to conclude, while first results gives encouraging results, it was identified that the splitting performance has dependencies on congestion control, reordering, scheduling, RTT ratio, though there's still something to do, and you will find more information in our presentation at this IETF109 ICCRG session. Next slide, please. I think that for the sake of time, I will skip this, just making it short here. We also implemented new congestion control schemes for DCCP. In that case, it is BBR version 1, which we make available, and with that we have a very good experience in terms of multipath performance. Next slide, please. So coming to the conclusion, native Android mobile phone implementation, as I have presented today, tested over commercial networks, reveals functionality for path election and seamless handover. The splitting and aggregation is supported by design, but needs further investigation. Next steps, we will update the multipath DCCP draft according to our current prototype development. Deutsche Telekom internally, we have initiated the process to publish the multipath DCCP implementation open source. I think that is quite interesting for you all. And we will continue research on the multipath DCCP splitting use case together with our academic partners, Karlsruhe University and City University of London. And what I would like to ask you today is, do you think that our drafts are ready for adoption?
Corey, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm wondering whether I'm understanding this correctly. Is the network path you're considering scheduling packets at the packet level without any flow awareness at all? Or is this behaving like ECMP would and trying to stickily send the same flow along the same path? Because these look like different problem spaces, and I'm curious as to which you're looking at and why.
Maybe can we go back to the figure in the first slide? Yeah, thank you. So what we do is we encapsulate traffic into the multipath DCCP framework. So at this point, it is independent. If this UDP is at IP traffic is a layer 2 traffic, that doesn't matter. What we leverage here is the DCCP flows we have established between UE and aggregation point. And into this flows, we encapsulate the traffic we get or we receive from the applications and are sent through this virtual network interface. And scheduling decisions are then based on the DCCP flow informations we have between UE and aggregation point.
So do all the IP packets in the same IP flow follow the same scheduler decision?
That was the question. Okay, that depends. So currently in our prototype, that's the case. However, we could implement a logic to employ different schedulers based on IP information, for example, or even on application service information, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't find it in the draft, so I need to read more to figure out what exactly is going on here. I think this is quite an important thing for me to understand. So I will read again, and I would appreciate more clarity if it's not there.
However, I think that is more related then to the framework draft. It's not to the multipath DCCP draft as such. And what our prototype would support already today is to set up different MP-DCCP tunnel connections so that we expose different virtual network interfaces in the UE and the aggregation point, and use this to separate IP flows then with different scheduling and or even reordering schemes.
Okay. Right. Okay. So I think probably we should take other questions on the presentation if we can. Is there anyone got any questions on the presentation before we talk about adoption? Okay, I don't see any at this moment. I have a few questions on the adoption question to the working group as a whole. I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is whether people have read these drafts, and there are several, so we'll have to make the right question available for that. The second one is doing this over DCCP the right thing to do for the working group? Is the problem space an interesting one for the working group?
I think I would like to see discussion of these topics on the list, in part to gauge level of interest in these drafts to figure out whether to adopt work in the space.
Yeah, I think so too, David. Do you think there's time to hold a quick feel around the room for who has read these drafts?
We can try to do that quickly. Let me see.
Just take the red question as, at least while David's getting that prepared, we'll take the red question as being a sign of first interest. But if you've become interested during this talk, then of course you won't have read them, and we just expect discussion on the list. So if you've read them at the moment, can you indicate when David tells us, which is now? And while we're talking about this, a couple of things to remind people. One is, this is going to be talked about in ICCRG from the congestion controls perspective, hopefully this week. So please look there. And the second is, there are multiple areas of IETF interest in ATSS, in multipath, and we are aware of these different things going on, and we'd like to make sure we coordinate well across these. So we're going to talk to our area director to help do that coordination.
Okay, I see that at least half a dozen people have read the draft, so there is some of interest. I think we need to go.
I think we'll just talk with our AD, David.
Yes, we need to consult the AD, and we'll figure out whether to run an adoption column list.
Okay, so authors, please keep in touch with your chairs on this one and prompt us, because we're going to make some discussions go forward, and then we're going to report back to the working group what we find by way of a suggestion for progress and see if people like it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we're done. I'm going to stay on the editor session for a little while to see if I can capture everything, make sure everything that's crucial gets captured in the minutes. I think though we are done. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.
Even earlier. Ugh.